Bukola sat on the cracked pavement, her back leaning against the rusted pole of a broken streetlight. In her arms she clutched her treasures, 3 battered books, their covers frayed and pages patched together with tape and scraps of string. The hum of the Lagos evening surrounded her, traders shouting, buses honking, and children laughing as they ran barefoot through the streets. But here, under this flickering bulb, a different kind of magic unfolded. Around her sat 5 children, their wide eyes reflecting the glow of the streetlight. Bukola bent over, chalk in hand, sketching letters onto the cement. A, B, C, she said, her voice steady despite the emptiness gnawing in her stomach. The children repeated after her, their voices carrying like a choir. For a few hours each night, they forgot their hunger, their rags, and the scorn of the world. To them, Bukola was not a homeless teenager, she was a teacher, a leader, and a beacon of hope. And though the streets had taken everything from her, her parents, her home, her childhood, Bukola refused to let them take her dream. When the last child ran off, clutching his broken slate, Bukola's body sagged with exhaustion. She had not eaten all day. The scent of roasted corn wafted from a nearby store, making her stomach twist painfully. The old seller, Mama Ijeoma, caught her longing glance and offered a cob. Bukola smiled gratefully, but instead of eating it, she handed it to Musa, the youngest of her pupils. "You need it more than I do," she whispered, ignoring the rumble in her belly. That night she curled up under the streetlight, using her books as a pillow. Hunger kept her awake, but she forced herself to imagine a different tomorrow, one where she was standing in front of a real blackboard, chalk in hand, with a classroom full of children. "Someday," she whispered to the stars, "I will be a teacher." Sleep brought no relief. Instead, it carried her back to the days when her father's booming laugh filled their one-room home. She remembered how he used to fix bicycles for neighbors, and how her mother, with warm hands and a gentle smile, sold akara by the roadside. Illness took them both, one after the other, leaving Bukola alone with debts she could not pay. The relatives who might have taken her in had turned their backs. Waking with tears on her cheeks, she hugged her books tightly. "Mama said education will carry me where my feet cannot," she told herself. Those words, once a lullaby, had become her shield. Every lesson she taught the children was her way of honoring her parents' memory, even if the world had forgotten them. By the next evening, more children gathered under the streetlight. Word had spread, Bukola could teach. Some brought scraps of paper, others carried sticks they used as pencils to trace letters in the dust. Their laughter rose above the traffic, echoing like bells in the twilight. Not everyone approved. A woman walking past sneered. "What foolishness is this? Teaching nonsense when you should be finding food." The insult stung, but Bukola kept her head high. The children's eager faces gave her strength. She would rather plant knowledge in their minds than coins in her pocket. One day, she told them, "These lessons will take you far." After class, Bukola stayed behind, scribbling lesson plans into the margins of her old books. She drew tiny classrooms in her mind, rows of desks, shelves of books, and a chalkboard filled with bright ideas. She imagined herself wearing a neat uniform, her hair tied back, teaching not just 5 children but 50. But then reality intruded, the ache in her stomach, the cold stone under her body, and the stares of strangers who dismissed her as nothing more than a street girl. Still, Bukola refused to let go of the dream. "I will build a school someday," she vowed under her breath. The flickering streetlight hummed above her, as if it, too, believed in her promise. Musa, a ragged boy of 10, became Bukola's shadow. He followed her everywhere, carrying broken pieces of chalk she had scavenged from school bins. Sometimes he teased her, asking why she wasted time teaching when begging brought money. But when Bukola turned stern, he grew quiet. "You'll see, Musa," she told him one night. "These letters and numbers will be worth more than coins." Musa rolled his eyes, but later, when she tested him, his face lit up with pride at getting answers right. Though he would never admit it, he was her most faithful student. One evening, dark clouds gathered, and the children hesitated. Bukola lifted her chin. "We learn, rain or shine," she declared. Soon the heavens opened, drenching them. She held her books beneath her shawl, scribbling letters in the mud while rain poured down her face. Passers-by shook their heads, some laughing at the sight of children huddled under a broken light in the storm. But the children's giggles rose above the rain. To them, learning under the storm was an adventure. For Bukola, it was proof that nothing, not even the skies, could stop her will to teach. One market evening, a group of older boys gathered near the streetlight. They jeered at Bukola, calling her a fake teacher and tossing pebbles at her books. Bukola stood firm, shielding her pupils with her body. Her voice did not tremble as she continued spelling out words. When the bullies grew louder, Musa shouted back, defending her. The children formed a circle around Bukola, their defiance silencing the crowd. The bullies left eventually, muttering insults, but Bukola's heart swelled with pride. Her pupils had chosen learning over fear. That night, after the children left, Bukola stayed awake beneath the streetlight. She pulled out her most precious possession, a battered notebook where she wrote her own dreams. In shaky handwriting, she scribbled, "My name is Bukola. One day, I will build a school for children like me." The words looked fragile on the page, but they glowed in her heart like fire. She hugged the notebook to her chest and whispered, "Even if the whole world forgets me, this dream will live." At the market, Bukola often lingered by Bobaton's kiosk, her eyes fixed on the shelves of dusty books. She never had money to buy them, but her hunger for knowledge pulled her there again and again. One evening, Bobaton called her over. "You like books, eh?" he asked kindly. Bukola nodded shyly. With a soft smile, he pulled out a stack of old, unsold textbooks. "Take these," he said. "Promise me you will read them and use them well." Bukola's heart nearly burst. She clutched the books to her chest, tears streaming down her cheeks. That night under the streetlight, when she opened the pages, the children gasped in awe at the colorful diagrams and fresh lessons. For Bukola, it felt like the world had given her a key to a door she had long prayed to open. The following evening, the girl in the spotless uniform surprised everyone by sitting cross-legged among the pupils. "Can I join?" she asked softly. Bukola hesitated but nodded. The other children stared in awe at her neat dress and shiny braids. Edeora introduced herself with a smile, as though she belonged there all along. During the lesson, she copied every word, raising her hand to answer questions. Her eagerness warmed Bukola's heart. For the first time, Bukola realized her teaching had reached beyond her world, it had touched someone from the other side of society. Over the next week, Edeora kept coming back. She laughed with the other children, shared her snacks, and even helped explain sums to the younger ones. Bukola felt both joy and worry. What if someone from Edeora's family discovered she was learning here? One evening, Edeora leaned close and whispered, "My teachers don't explain like you. You make me understand." Bukola's chest swelled with pride, but also with fear. She sensed their secret meetings could not last forever. When Musa returned after days of sulking, he found Edeora sitting proudly in the class. His eyes narrowed. Later, he pulled Bukola aside. "Be careful with that one. Rich people don't mix with us. If her parents find out, they'll blame you." Bukola sighed. "Musa, she's just a child who wants to learn." But his words stayed with her. Deep down, she knew he was right. Wealthy families guarded their children fiercely. Yet, how could she deny Edeora the joy of learning? One night, as Edeora walked back to the corner where a sleek black car waited, Bukola's heart skipped a beat. A uniformed driver stepped out, his eyes narrowing as he spotted Edeora with Bukola and the other children. He said nothing, but his frown was enough to send fear crawling into Bukola's chest. That night, she couldn't sleep. Was this the end of her little classroom? Would the driver tell Adeora's family? She hugged her books tightly, praying that tomorrow would not bring trouble. The following evening, Adeora didn't come. The class felt strangely empty without her. Bukola's heart pounded as she waited, every shadow making her nervous. Then, suddenly, a sleek car pulled up. The driver stepped out and opened the door. A tall man emerged, dressed in an elegant suit, his presence commanding respect. Beside him stood Adeora, her face pale with fear. Bukola froze, realizing at once, this was her father. Chief Oladipo, one of the wealthiest men in the city. His sharp eyes swept over the children, then settled on Bukola. "So you are the one teaching my daughter on the streets," he said slowly, his voice like thunder. The world around Bukola seemed to stop. Chief Oladipo's voice cut through the night air, each word heavy with authority. The children shrunk back, some clutching their slates to their chest as though for protection. Bukola stood frozen, her heart hammering in her chest. She wanted to explain, to tell him she only wanted to share knowledge, but her voice caught in her throat. Adeora ran forward, tugging at her father's sleeve. "Papa, she's not bad. She teaches me better than my school teachers." But her words only deepened the crease in Chief Oladipo's brow. He turned to Bukola with a glare that felt like fire. "You dare meddle with my child's education? Who gave you the right?" Bukola lowered her head, trembling, but whispered, "Sir, I only wanted to help her learn." Chief Oladipo folded his arms, studying her like a judge in a courtroom. "If you claim to teach, then answer me this," he said, and began firing complex arithmetic questions at her. Bukola's knees shook, but her mind sharpened. She had studied those problems countless times in her borrowed books. Carefully, she solved them aloud, her voice steady despite her fear. The children watched in awe as she answered each one correctly. Even Adeora's eyes sparkled with pride. Chief Oladipo frowned, clearly surprised, but unwilling to show it. "You know more than I expected," he admitted coldly. "But teaching my daughter on the street is unacceptable." Later that night, back at their mansion, Adeora refused to eat. She sat silently, tears brimming in her eyes. When her father asked what was wrong, she burst out, "Papa, Bukola is not just a street girl. She's a teacher. She makes me understand things you pay tutors for and they fail." Her words struck him harder than he expected. Adeora rarely challenged him, but now her small voice carried an urgency he could not ignore. Chief Oladipo sat back, troubled. Could it be true that a homeless girl had succeeded where expensive tutors had failed? Back under the broken streetlight, Bukola sat hugging her books tighter than ever. She feared Chief Oladipo would return with the police, or worse, forbid Adeora from ever coming again. The thought of losing her most eager pupil weighed heavily on her. Musa tried to reassure her. "Forget that rich girl. We don't need her." But Bukola shook her head. It wasn't about money or status, it was about the joy of teaching, about reaching someone who wanted to learn. "Every child deserves knowledge," she whispered, though fear lingered in her chest. A week later, a black car pulled up beside the streetlight once again. The children scattered, terrified, but Bukola stood her ground. Chief Oladipo stepped out, his suit gleaming under the moonlight. This time, he did not scowl. Instead, he handed Bukola a clean notebook and pen. "Teach her," he said simply, nodding toward Adeora who smiled from the car window. "But if I ever hear of carelessness or danger, this ends immediately." Bukola's eyes widened, relief flooding through her. She bowed her head, whispering, "Thank you, sir." That night, the lessons began anew, but under the watchful eyes of a billionaire. Days later, Chief Oladipo made another unexpected decision. "You will no longer teach her here," he told Bukola. "From now on, you come to my house." Bukola's breath caught in her throat. The mansion. The thought was terrifying. When she first stepped into the marble-floored halls, her bare feet faltered. Chandeliers sparkled above her, and maids in uniforms eyed her with disdain. But Edeora beamed and pulled her toward the study. "Don't mind them. Just teach me like you always do." Bukola's voice shook at first, but soon the rhythm of learning carried her forward. The maids whispered as she passed, mocking her ragged clothes and calling her the beggar teacher. Bukola heard every word, but she swallowed her pride and kept walking. At night, she cried silently under her streetlight, but each morning, she returned to the mansion. Edeora defended her often. "She is better than all of you," she snapped at the servants once, her small face fierce. Still, Bukola knew respect would not come easily. She resolved to let her work speak louder than their insults. One evening, after a lesson, Chief Oladipo called her aside. "Tell me, girl," he said, his voice softer this time, "how did you end up on the streets?" Bukola hesitated, shame threatening to silence her. But then she remembered her mother's words about truth. She told him everything, about losing her parents, about the relatives who abandoned her, about surviving with nothing but books. Chief Oladipo listened quietly, his stern expression unreadable. When she finished, his eyes lingered on her tattered notebook. For the first time, he saw not just a street child but a survivor. The next day, Chief Oladipo handed her an envelope thick with money. "Take this. Buy yourself food, clothes, and shelter." Bukola stared at it, her hands trembling. For a moment, she imagined what it could mean: a bed, a roof, maybe even more books. But then she shook her head firmly. "Sir," she said, pushing it back, "I don't want money. I want education. That's what will change my life." Chief Oladipo's eyebrows rose in surprise. Few adults he knew would refuse such an offer. Something shifted in him at that moment. This girl was different. That night, Edeora burst into her father's study, her eyes blazing. "Papa, you must help Bukola. She's the best teacher I've ever had. Please, don't let her suffer like this." Chief Oladipo looked at his daughter, the one thing he loved most in the world, and saw tears streaming down her face. He sighed deeply, the weight of her words sinking into his heart. Perhaps it was time to do more than test the girl. Perhaps it was time to change her life. The next morning, Bukola was summoned to Chief Oladipo's mansion. She stood trembling at the massive iron gates, her books clutched to her chest. When the gates swung open, she walked through gardens so green they felt unreal. Inside, Edeora ran to hug her. "Papa says you can study here too," she cried with excitement. Bukola's eyes widened. "Me? Study here?" Chief Oladipo nodded slowly. "I will sponsor your education. But remember, this is not charity, it is an investment in your potential. Don't waste it." Bukola bowed her head, whispering, "Thank you, sir. I won't." On her first day in uniform, Bukola barely recognized herself. The neat blouse, pleated skirt, and polished shoes felt like armor. She stared into the mirror, almost unable to believe the reflection was her own. For years she had taught under a broken streetlight. Now, she would walk into a real classroom as a student. The children she once taught gathered around, cheering for her. Musa grinned widely. "Teacher Bukola, now you are the one learning." She laughed, hugging him tightly. "And one day, Musa, you will too." The classroom buzzed as Bukola entered. Some students whispered, noticing her worn satchel and shy demeanor. The teacher introduced her, and she sat quietly, taking everything in. The blackboard gleamed, the desk shone, and the shelves were stacked with books that smelled of possibility. But whispers soon turned to mocking. "That's the street girl," a boy sneered. Bukola flushed, shame burning her cheeks. Still, she bent over her notebook, determined not to let their words distract her. She hadn't come this far to break now. Days passed, and the ridicule grew. Some classmates refused to sit beside her. Others giggled when she raised her hand. At lunch, they whispered, "She eats like she's never seen food before." Bukola swallowed her pain silently, focusing on her studies. Each night, she cried under her thin blanket, but every morning she wiped her tears and returned to class. Her hunger for knowledge outweighed the sting of insult. She reminded herself, "I have survived worse than their laughter." One afternoon, the teacher posed a difficult math problem. None of the students volunteered. Slowly, Bukola raised her hand. Sneakers rippled through the room, but the teacher nodded. Bukola stood, her voice trembling at first, but then steady as she walked through the solution. When she finished, silence filled the class. The teacher clapped. "Excellent, Bukola," he declared. Shock spread across her classmates' faces. For the first time, the mocking stopped. That day, a tiny flame of respect was lit. Bukola spent every evening buried in books. She studied by candlelight until her eyes burned, writing notes, memorizing formulas, and practicing essays. Sometimes Edeore joined her, though she often fell asleep halfway through. Bukola smiled at the sight, gently covering her with a blanket before continuing. The maids still whispered about her, but Chief Oladipo noticed her diligence. Passing by the study one night, he paused at the door, watching her bent over her desk, lips moving silently as she recited facts. For the first time, pride stirred in his chest. Edeora adored Bukola. She boasted to her classmates, "My best teacher is not in school, it's Bukola." Though some scoffed, Edeora didn't care. She began insisting Bukola sit beside her in class. "If they laugh at you, they laugh at me too," she said firmly. Bukola's heart swelled at her loyalty. She had always been the one protecting children under the streetlight. Now, someone was standing up for her. Together, they formed a bond unshakable by gossip or wealth. Musa, meanwhile, struggled. Without Bukola's daily lessons, he drifted toward older boys who lured him into petty theft. One evening, Bukola found him bruised and hiding. "They made me do it," he muttered, eyes downcast. Bukola hugged him tightly. "Musa, don't let the streets steal your future. Promise me you'll come back to learning." He nodded reluctantly, and Bukola gave him one of her old notebooks. "Every page is a chance to start again," she said softly. Months passed, and Bukola's brilliance shone. She answered questions others couldn't, wrote essays that teachers praised, and earned top marks in exams. Soon, whispers of ridicule turned to whispers of admiration. Some classmates still looked at her with disdain, but others began asking her for help with their work. For the first time, Bukola felt what her mother had once promised, that education could carry her where her feet could not. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was rising. One evening, Chief Oladipo called Bukola into his study. He studied her carefully before speaking. "You remind me of myself when I was young," he admitted. "I had nothing once, too. But I fought, and I built what you see today." Bukola's eyes widened. "Sir, you were poor too." He nodded, his voice grave. "Yes. And that is why I believe you will go far. You refused money because you wanted knowledge. That is a rare strength." For the first time, Chief Oladipo smiled warmly at her. In that moment, Bukola knew she was no longer just a street girl in his eyes. She was family. When the school announced a statewide essay competition, Bukola's teacher encouraged her to participate. The theme was education as the key to change. Bukola poured her heart into the essay, writing about teaching under a broken streetlight and the children who trusted her. On the day of the results, her name was called first. Winner, Bukola Adeyemi. The hall erupted in applause. Bukola's eyes filled with tears as she walked to the stage. For the first time, her story was not one of shame, but of triumph. News reporters soon caught wind of her victory. "Street girl wins state essay competition," the headline screamed. Photographers came to the school, snapping pictures of Bukola in her uniform, her books clutched to her chest. Some classmates now looked at her with awe instead of scorn. Chief Oladipo watched the news quietly in his study, pride swelling in his chest. For once, he didn't just see her as Adora's teacher. He saw her as proof that greatness could come from the most unlikely places. Musa, hearing of her success, returned to her side. "Teacher Bukola," he said shyly, "they said you are famous now." Bukola laughed, hugging him tightly. "Fame means nothing if I forget where I came from," she told him. She promised to continue teaching him after school, ensuring he wouldn't be left behind. Together, they sat under the streetlight once more. Though her world was expanding, Bukola knew her mission remained the same, to share knowledge wherever it was needed. But not everyone celebrated her rise. A few wealthy parents scoffed at the idea of their children learning alongside a street girl. Rumors spread that Chief Oladipo was wasting his resources. Some even whispered that Bukola was manipulating him for gain. Bukola heard the whispers and felt their sting, but she refused to let envy derail her. "Let my actions speak for me," she told herself, pressing harder in her studies and teaching with renewed determination. One evening, Chief Oladipo invited Bukola to dinner with Edeora. As they ate, he said solemnly, "You have proven yourself. When I first saw you, I doubted. Now I see your fire cannot be quenched." Bukola lowered her eyes humbly. "Sir, I only want to learn, so I can give back." Chief Oladipo nodded. "And you will. From this day, I call you my daughter as well." Tears pricked Bukola's eyes, for she had gained not just education, but a family. Her victory at the state competition led to a national invitation. She traveled with her school team to Abuja, standing nervously before an audience of officials, professors, and students from across the country. Her essay, spoken aloud in her clear, steady voice, earned a standing ovation. That night, as she held the gold medal, Bukola whispered, "Mama, Papa, I hope you can see me." It was more than a win, it was the vindication of every hardship she had endured. After the national win, scholarships and awards poured in. Newspapers published her story, calling her the streetlight teacher. NGOs reached out, offering to sponsor her education abroad. But Bukola stayed grounded. She continued teaching Edeora, tutoring Musa, and helping her classmates who struggled. "My victories mean nothing if I stand alone," she told herself. She knew that lifting others was her true calling. Some of her old tormentors now tried to befriend her. "Bukola, remember us. We always believed in you," they lied, eager to share her spotlight. Others grew more bitter, plotting ways to drag her down. Bukola smiled politely but stayed cautious. She had learned that success not only attracted friends, it revealed true enemies. Still, she refused to let bitterness consume her. "I will let my light shine," she whispered, "no matter who tries to dim it." At a youth conference, Bukola was invited to speak. Standing before hundreds of young people, she told her story, not with shame, but with courage. She described the streetlight, the hunger, the broken books, and the laughter of children who believed in her. "Education saved me," she declared. "And it can save millions more. Never despise small beginnings, for even a streetlight can become a classroom." The hall erupted in thunderous applause, and for once, Bukola felt truly seen. After the conference, Chief Oladipo placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "You have gone beyond my expectations, Bukola. You are not just my daughter, you are a light for this nation." His words carried the weight of prophecy. Bukola realized then that her journey was no longer about survival, or even her own dreams. It was about building ladders for others to climb. And with every step forward, she carried the streetlight within her heart. Bukola's victory at the state competition led to a national invitation. She traveled with her school team to Abuja, standing nervously before an audience of officials, professors, and students from across the country. Her essay, spoken aloud in her clear, steady voice, earned a standing ovation. That night, as she held the gold medal, Bukola whispered, "Mama, Papa, I hope you can see me." It was more than a win, it was the vindication of every hardship she had endured. After her speech at the youth conference, representatives from an international NGO approached Bukola. They were impressed by her story and wanted her to join their leadership program. "With your experience, you could inspire thousands more," they said. Bukola's heart raced. This was bigger than she ever imagined. But she hesitated. She didn't want to abandon her roots. That night, she prayed for guidance. She realized she could do both, represent her people abroad, and continue building hope at home. For Bukola, every opportunity was a stepping stone for others. Before leaving for the program, Bukola returned to the broken streetlight where it all began. Children still gathered there, tracing letters in the dust. She joined them, laughing through tears as memories flooded back. "This is where the dream started," she whispered. With Chief Oladipo's help, she promised to have the streetlight fixed, the pavement cleaned, and benches installed. The children cheered. "No one should ever call this place a waste again," she declared. It would become a symbol of possibility. Musa had struggled, but with Bukola's constant encouragement, he returned to school. He stopped hanging with the wrong crowd and began to excel in his studies. "You saved me," he told Bukola one evening. She shook her head. "No, Musa. You saved yourself. I only reminded you of who you could be." Seeing Musa's transformation filled her with pride. It was proof that her mission was working. She vowed to fight for every child like him, lost, doubting, but capable of greatness. The government invited Bukola to Abuja to receive a National Youth Award. Standing on stage, holding the plaque, she felt humbled. Dignitaries applauded, cameras flashed, and her name trended across the country. But her acceptance speech remained simple: "This is not about me. It is about every child who deserves a chance to learn, no matter where they come from." Her words struck the nation, reminding everyone that true wealth lies not in money, but in minds awakened. Late one evening, Chief Oladipo sat with Bukola in his study. "I was wrong about you," he admitted. "At first, I thought you were a distraction to my daughter. Now I see you are her greatest gift." He paused, eyes softening. "I once believed money was the answer to everything. You've taught me that knowledge and compassion are worth far more." Bukola bowed her head, her heart full. "Sir, without your belief, I wouldn't be here." For the first time, he embraced her like his own child. With her growing influence, Bukola established the Streetlight Foundation for Education. Its mission was clear: to provide books, classes, and hope for street children. Volunteers rallied, donations poured in, and soon her small dream blossomed into a movement. The first center opened in Lagos, with a library, classrooms, and free meals. Children who once begged in the market now sat at desks, pencils in hand, their laughter echoing through bright halls. Bukola wept as she cut the ribbon. Her dream was no longer hers alone, it belonged to them all. She was soon invited to speak at a global education summit. Standing before leaders from around the world, she told her story of hunger, loss, and the streetlight that became her classroom. The hall rose in applause, many wiping tears. Afterward, offers came from universities abroad, eager to host her for further studies. But Bukola smiled politely. "My education began on the streets of Lagos. I will never forget that." Years later, Bukola returned to her parents' village in Saka. With the support of the foundation, she built a modern school in their honor. "This is for Mama and Papa," she whispered at the opening, her hands trembling as she cut the ribbon. Villagers gathered, some who once doubted her now applauding her success. Children ran through the halls, shouting with joy. For Bukola, this was the sweetest victory, bringing light back to the soil where her story began. Newspapers, television stations, and social media hailed her as the streetlight teacher who lit a nation. Young girls carried her picture, parents told her story to their children, and teachers quoted her words in classrooms. Bukola remained humble, still teaching, still mentoring. Titles mean nothing if I forget my mission, she often said. And everywhere she went, she reminded others, if I could rise from the streetlight, so can you. One evening, Bukola returned to the corner where it all began. The once broken streetlight now shone brightly, illuminating neat benches and children reading under its glow. She sat among them, listening to their laughter, her heart swelling with pride. Chief Oladipo, Edeora, and Musa stood behind her, smiling. The air was filled with possibility. Bukola looked up at the glowing light and whispered, I was once a homeless girl with nothing but books. Now, I am proof that knowledge is the greatest wealth. Her journey was complete, from the streets, to the world, and back again, carrying hope for generations to come.